Hey folks, David Stewart here. Time for some more Storycraft, and today's topic is a very interesting one. That is waifus and husbandos. If you are not familiar with this term, it's really associated with weeb culture, which is Western fans of Japanese media, really specifically games and especially anime. And the waifu is really an active fantasy that a fan engages in of imagining themselves in a long-term relationship or a marriage with a fictional character. The reality is, this is not something limited to Japanese media, but is something that occurs in the West all the time, and is something that's used in things like romance novels. What makes it unique to weeb culture is that males are the ones not only engaging in the fantasy, but talking about their fantasies and comparing their fantasies to each other, and of course, in a typical male fashion, arguing over whose is the best. This is something that you see in fan fiction for Western stuff as well, is people engaging in husbando fantasy, which I'm imagining he's my husband because he's the best one. He's the best boy in this thing. So if you see people arguing online, this person's the best girl in some anime, that's what they're talking about. Or this person's the best girl in some game, that's the waifu. That's the waifu thing. Now, can you use this as a storyteller? Yes, you can. Now, you will see this in anime, and you will also see this especially in games. Games that have a dating sim element to them, which would include a lot of BioWare games here in the West, but a lot of different Japanese games like Persona, for example. And in that, you have lots of different characters, and you role-playing as the main character are actively engaging in conversations and getting to know those characters and choosing which one you're going to try to romance and eventually ending up with like a single romantic partner. That's typically how the dating sims work. And because you're actively engaging that tends to enhance the waifu experience because you as a player are actively making the choice to get to know another character better, to reject him or her, or to end up in a relationship with him or her. So games tend to do this really well. And then you have things like visual novels, which are basically just the dating sim aspect, kind of with all the other stuff stripped out. So it really is a presentation of a novel and different characters talking to each other, but you have some control over, as a player, which character you're going to end up marrying, right? So it actively engages in this waifu fantasy. There's even some really silly ones, which is like Mein Waifu is the Führer, which I don't know if that'll ever come out, but it turns all of the German military higher ups, including Adolf Hitler, into anime girls that you then engage in courtship with. So it's a funny phenomenon, and I said it's pretty interesting because males are engaging in it, or they feel safe enough within the weeb fandom to actually engage in this sort of fantasy. But usually this is something that's used with females here in the West in the romance genre. Here's the way it's typically presented: is you have a main character, and that main character has a choice of several different partners. So in a romance novel, it's very common to have a female protagonist, and she has 2 to 3 males who are at least tangentially interested in her. And those 3 males, she has to make a choice between which one she's actually going to end up in a relationship with. And the romance novel kind of goes from there, developing one of those relationships into the actual one, showing that that's kind of the best choice. The character will end up making the correct choice for the correct man and figure out some problems with the other males that end up kind of having them discarded. In greater fandoms, though, what you can end up with is fan fiction that involves the other choices. That this one was better than that one. So really common in romance novels, and common in larger, more popular books that happen to use some of the tropes from romance, even if they're not focusing on the relationship to the same extent that a romance novel does. So if you want to use this in your media, whether it's a game or it's a comic or a novel, there's a couple things that I think can help. So the first one is your main character needs to have choice. Okay, so that means that there has to be multiple targets for affection, and that allows the reader to actively engage in the kind of fantasy and be wondering about, I want to know more about this character. Is this one really going to be the good one? And start to think about which one they really like more than the others. That means you need to have some choice. The second one is those characters have to be differentiated from each other. They have to be pretty different. And one of the easiest ways to do this is to use those character archetypes that I've talked about in so many of my other videos. So you can have a bad boy character, and then you can have like a more responsible character, and they're contrast to each other. And as maybe you get to know them, you find that there's deeper levels there. So maybe the character's initially attracted to the bad boy because he's he's dangerous and he's charismatic and he's got all these other things going on. And then as the story progresses and you get further into it, they see, oh, there's other things about him that make him not a bad boy. Maybe he's really romantic. And the other guy who seems very responsible, you get deeper and he's got some dangerous elements. So the roles start to reverse, because like the goody two-shoes and the bad boy will end up with kind of different arcs. So if you have one that's a goody two-shoes, one that's a bad boy, and start from there, they're going to go in different directions, which will make the progress of the relationships between the two that much more interesting. And I think games that have been really successful with this will do this really specifically. The character has an initial presentation, and as you actively engage in dialogue with that character, getting to know that character, choosing to talk to that character, like in a game like Dragon Age or a game like Persona, the more you know that their surface presentation is just a surface, and you get to know more of them. And they become a more three-dimensional character, and therefore your attraction to them as the player will go up as you kind of role play that experience, or it'll go down depending on who you are as an individual. And like I said, games tend to hype this up really well because you can engage in role play. And this is different from, say, a traditional JRPG, Japanese RPG, which the narrative is mostly set. You're not engaging in any kind of romance role play. You're the character, the story is what it is, and you are along for the ride, and your choices have to do with how you are engaging in battles in the gameplay. Having that dating sim element in the game can, I think, really enhance a lot of people's affection towards characters. I think of a game like Mass Effect 2, which as far as its overall plot, was actually pretty weak. It was probably the weakest of the series in terms of plot. There just really isn't much to it, and they don't really explain what's going on. But people have a strong affection for it because they like the gameplay, first of all, but also this dating sim element was way more prominent than it was in the first one. In the first one, you had kind of three choices, sometimes two, depending on who you chose to save or kill at one point in the game. So it's like you could have dated, Liara as any gender, or you could have dated Caden or Ashley. And that's pretty much as far as you get to go with that. And in the second one, it's like you can romance all these characters. You can romance all kinds of characters and explore all that out. And it made a lot more character-focused experience. Even if you weren't romancing them, you were getting to know so many of them more that you end up having a lot more attachment and affection to the characters in that second game than the first game. So people that view that second game as better than the first one, it's probably because they liked the character interactions a little bit more. So that's a really good example from a game for really how this can enhance the experience pretty significantly. I think, say, a game like Persona 4 would not be quite as popular if it didn't have the cast of characters it had and the interactions you have with them. There's a huge part of the game that's dedicated to like ranking up your social links with these characters by spending time having dialogue with them, and some of the things you choose to say to them they'll not like. You have to actually think about what they want or what they don't want, and you can eventually get into a relationship with one of them, and you can get into a relationship with more than one, and they'll catch you cheating, which is a whole nother thing that can have an emotional impact. And if you cheat on a character, maybe she'll cry or something like that. So that really can, I think, enhance the experience for a lot of games. For a novel, that's a romance element that I think can enhance the experience. But you have to be sure that you're spending time actually exploring those characters and letting them breathe and talk, and that you start with this stuff in mind so that by the time you get towards the end of the book, you've really gained a three-dimensional knowledge of who these characters are. They're not just kind of static objects for desire, but rather they have personalities that somebody is going to be going through the fantasy process of judging and deciding, oh, I like this person more. This is the kind of person I would marry. It's very common for people to engage in those kind of fantasies in romance novels and plots, including men, as we can see with the weeb phenomenon and waifus. So anyway, that's how you can use it in your stories. And one of those things, main one is you got to have choice, and those characters have to be differentiated from each other. And the protagonist has to have some reason to have to choose between them. And you also have to, of course, really get to know them. You have to spend a lot of time letting the characters be known to the reader or to the consumer of the media, the gamer, whoever it happens to be. So that's about it. Let me know down below, like, some of your favorite examples of this phenomenon happening. If you have like a favorite character from a game that ended up becoming a favorite character through these social interactions, even if it's not in a romantic sense, or you didn't engage in some sort of romantic fantasy in your mind with that character, this is how a lot of people become attached to certain characters, especially in games. So let me know down below if you have any kinds of favorites. And newest books is Tyrant's Gallow, which is actually Moonsong Book 2. So you can get Moonsong Book 1, City of Silver, and then read this one, which is out now. Book 3 will hopefully come out later this year. Got some other stuff planned in the fantasy department, including... Well, I'll get to that in another video. So that's the newest one. And of course, if you need some good advice for how to set up your life and deal with the process of being a writer, check out Keys to Prolific Creativity. It's $2.99 on Amazon. And you guys have a great day.